And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for tuning in. This week marked the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, the day founded by Wisconsin Senator Gaylord Nelson became, 50 years later, an international movement of people who are saying, look, we'd like clean air and clean water. We want an environment that we can pass along to our children. And look, I think back to every Earth Day that I can remember going back to when I was a kid. You go back into the 1970s when I grew up as a child, in a place where I like to argue was the home of the Clean Air and Clean Water Act. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, where Lake Erie was right there, ever present, and somewhere as a kid you couldn't go into. And I tell the story often, especially to my kids, that I remember, going to the lake and seeing the fish in the water. The difference is the fish that I remember, they were swimming on their side, looking up at the sky with one eye, floating along the top of the water because they were dead. The lake, when I was a kid, was basically dead. Industry had poisoned it. Industry had polluted. We didn't care. We need the jobs. And we hear a lot of this today, and it's a lot of the frames that, especially during the Trump administration, we're hearing we need to go back to the way things were. We need to deregulate. We need to bring back the dirty industries. And I'm nowhere near that. And look, as a labor guy, and I'll be the first to tell you I am one of the biggest labor supporters in this country, I want to make sure that my kids get clean air and clean water, but also they get jobs that are going to be able to support a family. So this is where the divide has been, and this is where the people who want the status quo love to pit us against one another. Because I do believe there is a way forward for blue-collar workers and for green activists to march together and say, yeah, we want a just economy. We want a clean environment. We want to do the right thing. It's you policymakers that keep screwing this up. And again, for me, it always comes back to the policies. It all comes back to our politics and ultimately us. Because we vote for these people who, have been dragging their feet for 50 years on this stuff. We have technology that could move us in a better direction. We have the ability, nationally at least, to ensure that we start doing the right stuff and then leading by example and telling the rest of the world that you've got to come along. And I hear people say all the time, but Rick, China's the biggest polluter, India, the biggest polluter. And right now they are. There's no question about that. But understand, China is moving quickly towards wind and solar. They're moving quickly away from the dirty stuff. They're trying. And they're developing the technologies of the future. And this is one of those moments where the America that we love to believe exists, the way we like to think of our country as innovators, as entrepreneurs, as people who are always forward thinking, we're not right now. You've got a movement in this country who, trying to keep us back in the 1950s, trying to keep us with antiquated technology. Why? Well, because they've told us that there's nothing else. And if we take this away, what are you going to have? Which is why I think the conversation that I want to have today is how we move forward and how we ensure that the workers and the people who are going to be negatively affected by a transition to a more green, more clean economy aren't going to be left behind. What we've learned over the years, especially through deindustrialization, is those factory workers of the 70s and the 80s and in the 90s, all those people, they got shortchanged. There's no question about it. They got screwed. And what we should be fighting for is to ensure that next wave doesn't happen. That we ensure that people who are going to be affected by this aren't left and aren't dumped and aren't forgotten. And the next generation of jobs are good, solid union jobs with family-sustaining wages, excellent health care benefits, and a retirement security package that allows people to look towards retirement eagerly instead of, well, with great trepidation like we're seeing today. The sad reality is we're all bogged down. We got our 401ks, which thanks to this latest collapse have been 200.5s. People are worried. We need to have that kind of security under the feet of workers that my grandparents' generation enjoyed. Sad reality is the moneyed interests, the powerful corporate interests, have trained us like Pavlovian dogs to think there's no alternative. There's no way forward here. Well, all we have is what we have. And if you lose this, and if they take it away from you, you're going to have nothing. And we saw that in West Virginia as the right wing hammered on Hillary Clinton for saying, we're going to get rid of these coal jobs, but, and they never went into the but she was saying, we're going to bring in new technology. We're going to bring in new jobs. We're going to replace those coal jobs with better technological jobs, with better paying jobs. We're not going to leave you behind. And that's got to be part of this message. I'm with the Greeniacs. I'm with people who are saying we need wind and solar and geothermal. We need to power our cars on sunflowers. I'm with you. Let's figure out how to do it. Let's figure out how to make sure that my kids get to breathe clean air. My grandkids inherit something of a future. I'm right there with you. But it's going to take smart policy. And it was one of these moments on a policy front that when my kids were small, and this is going back a couple of years, I remember my son went to me, Dad, and he was probably like, 6, maybe 7. And it was right around Earth Day time. He said, why is it that every Walmart, every shopping mall, every one of these huge buildings, how come they don't have solar panels on their roofs like we have on ours? How come we have all this empty space that you could easily put, a huge array of solar panels on to fuel our economy? Why aren't we doing this? And trying to explain to a 5 or 6-year-old on the on the complexities of our broken political system and the fact that lobbyist money goes into the pockets of our elected leaders who ensure that nothing gets done, didn't come over well. He struggled with the concept of being bogged down with corporate cash and came back to, that's not right. And there's part of me that goes, maybe we need to reach inside of ourselves and find that inner 5-year-old that says things just aren't right and start thinking about how we make them right. This is one of those moments. This is one of those times, 50th anniversary of Earth Day. This is the time we start talking about what kind of a future do we want. But while we're thinking about what kind of a future we want, part of that equation has to be, what does that look like? What does that look like for working people? And, as I've been doing this show over the years, I've had it thrown at me numerous times that, well, unions are special interests and they only care about their members, and their members are in these dirty industries, so they're the problem. And I submit to you that's the wrong way and the wrong frame to look at this. Union workers are like everybody else. I'm a union worker. I want to make sure that the environment is as clean as possible. I want to make sure that our kids and our grandkids and our great-grandkids have a future to inherit, that they get to see trees and breathe air. Absolutely. But in the interim, I want to make sure that the jobs are good quality union jobs, that we can support a family. And here's the thing. Here's the kicker part. You don't have to give up one for the other. They aren't mutually exclusive. We can do both. We have the ability to think beyond what's being served to us. The idea of there's no alternative. We have the ability to make this right. And that's where it comes down to, at times like this, to talk about how do we move forward with better technology, with great intentions, but also not leaving the people behind who are affected by it negatively. And also bring us back together, so that we can push forward and we can fight legislatively and we can push elected leaders to do the right thing, to find their inner 5-year-old and to look at something and say, you know what, it's not right that there's all of this opportunity and we've chosen to do nothing. That's the problem. I would love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. Today, we're going to talk to a couple of union leaders, a couple of folks who are going to tell us what their unions are doing. The electrical workers, IBEW, and LIUNA, the laborers union, are going to be here to share some thoughts. I'd love to hear yours. You can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. When we come back, Chris Anderson's going to be here from District 3 of the IBEW. Back after this. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. So the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, as we've been saying. And look, this is one of those moments where we take a second and we think about where we've been, but also where we're going. Policy-wise, how do we move away from the dirty stuff and move towards things that are going to move our economy forward without all of the pain and suffering that is quite possibly going to be there. And that's why I've asked Chris Anderson to come talk with us. Chris is international representative with the IBEW's District 3. Chris, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me, Rick.
So, with Earth Day, and this is our 50th anniversary of doing this, which is quite an incredible feat in my view, we start talking about how do we move away from, the dirty stuff and move towards the clean stuff. I think one of the unions that's out on the front of the climate change issue, talking about, how do we train workers for the next generation?
Well, we've always taken the approach as the IBEW that we understand the importance of having a diverse portfolio in the energy sector. Part of that is training the workforce for the upcoming technologies of tomorrow and being prepared to install and implement these technologies as soon as they come about so we can hit the ground running. At the same time, we also have a large contingency of membership that work in the fossil fuel industry, which is, all of a sudden become a four-letter word. We want to be able to harness the energy and the future technologies of tomorrow without turning our backs on those folks. We understand the importance of carbon and what it does to the climate, and we're certainly not climate deniers. But at the same time, we want to invest in carbon capture and sequestration technologies that will keep those men and women working in the industries that they've come to love over the years.
Right. Because one of the things we hear, Chris, especially from I don't want to paint the folks who want a clean energy sector. I don't want to paint the Green New Deal folks as extremists, but I think they believe that this is going to be a really quick, easy transition. That there aren't going to be people affected, or we don't care about them, and I think it's important to have those conversations about how do we move our economy forward. We all agree that we want to breathe clean air. We want to drink clean water. We want an environment that we can leave to our children. The question is from a policy perspective, how do we move forward legislatively, but also as a working class to ensure that nobody's really left behind in this. And I think, a while ago, you and I had talked about, Hillary Clinton talking about, coal miners being left behind, which is just the absolute worst thing to be thing to be talking about.
Well, I think when it comes to especially Western Pennsylvania, Eastern Ohio, West Virginia, throughout that corridor, you still have a lot of men and women that associate the coal industry with a healthy livelihood that they knew of yesteryear. And while those jobs may not be around, I think that they still hold on to that hope. Whether or not it's warranted is outside of my opinion. But I think that there's still a lot of people out there that are yearning for some industry to come back to these areas. And I think in the last presidential cycle, you saw President Trump tap into those fears and hopes, and that's why you saw a groundswell of support for him.
Yeah, because at the end of this, I get a lot of people who think that, we're going to just do away with, it's going to be immediate. We're going to do away with the old stuff and snap to something new. And I don't, there's technology there, and the technology is evolving, and your union is doing a terrific job of adapting to those technological changes. But this is going to be a long process. And my fear is that labor gets left behind as we still defend people who, their jobs, their livelihoods, their families' existence are based on those jobs that people just seem to want to write off without forethought. I think having these conversations are important.
Well, I think that, you've seen Pennsylvania as almost a small epicenter when it comes to the energy grid because of the diverse portfolio that we have. We have a large sector of nuclear fleet. We have, right now we have about 8 coal power plants that are left, numerous gas power plants that are popping up, and we also have some solar and wind technologies that are coming about. So Pennsylvania is a net exporter for energy, and we're fortunate in the land that we cover that we have New York around us, New Jersey, and the DMV area that are large customers when it comes to electricity. So we kind of became their number one source for that option, and that's I think that we need to think about the future and how we can maintain that supply without upsetting the market.
Yeah, one of the things that I keep coming back to is this is a legislative issue. This isn't something that a union can really do, and I think unions get a bad rap in that people say, well, the unions don't have a plan on climate. They don't. All they want to do is defend the old economy. And I'm going, no, they're defending what they've got because our policy leaders, they haven't led on this issue. There's no clear consensus of where we go to the future. There's no clear consensus of what the green energy field looks like, of what the future looks like. So of course we're going to defend what we're holding on to now until somebody decides.
Well, and I think that the IBEW can point to their attempts in training that they've done over the years. We have inside wiremen that are qualified to build and maintain nuclear and coal power plants and also install solar and wind technology. So we're qualified to do all of the work across the board. It's just a matter of finding ready and willing partners to deploy the technologies.
Yeah, excellent point. Do we have enough people to? Because we keep hearing about we need to have like a Manhattan Project kind of green revolution, and do we have enough people? Do we have enough marching soldiers to be able to do all the solar panels and put up all the windmills and do all the geothermal? Do we have enough people to do that?
Well, one thing, as society as a whole, we've done a lot of efficiency improvements, and the construction industry is no different. Talking to the business manager of Local 5 out of Pittsburgh, he said on one of the older convention centers he worked on, there was about 350 electricians down there working. On the most recent convention center that they did, they had 50 doing the same amount of work. So I think that you're going to see a lot less people, but they're a lot more efficient at their job.
Yeah, and again, pointing that out, the reality is you hire union electricians because they know what the hell they're doing. They're highly skilled, highly trained, and they get the job done a lot quicker. And I make the argument for all union workers. They're going to be the most quality, they're the most skilled, the most trained, and most dedicated. And I believe they're going to get the job done on time and under budget, as we've seen in numerous cases.
Well, and I think that's the big thing that folks have to understand. I know a lot of labor organizations get a bad connotation when they get brought up, and I think that we always point to on time and under budget and done safely. That's our huge credo that we consistently live by, because we understand the importance that people are investing a lot of money into a reliable workforce, and that's all we want to be.
Yeah, I mean, for me, again, I look at these moments of, especially with Earth Day being the backdrop, and as we talk about moving forward, I want to make sure that people understand that workers have to be at the front of this. Any change in what we're doing, we have to make sure that we the people actually benefit from it.
Well, and I think that one of the big things that people have to understand is it's the men and women that live and work in these areas that understand, most importantly, we need clean air, we need fresh water. We do not want to jeopardize our quality of life, but at the same time, we understand the need for a healthy income at the same time, and we feel that there's a balance there that we can find.
Yeah, it's just getting our policy leaders, and I keep coming back to this because we're so divided and polarized as a country right now that I fear that we, just because of the polarization, nothing gets done, and we end up continually at each other's throats, divided, pitted against one another, and nothing actually gets done.
Well, and that's one of the frustrating things that I find in Harrisburg, is that everything is so binary. It's either this or that. There isn't a lot of compromise, and when we do get to a situation where we find compromise, it's almost like we don't know how to act, and that's one of the even more frustrating things, is that you get people to the table, and hey, we understand that we do have a lot more in common than we don't have in common. So I think if we can tap into that, we'd be a lot more better off.
No, I'm right there with you. Last question I've got for you. You know, in looking at this, you know, what's the message that you as an IBEW member, as a representative, want the greater public to understand about the work that you guys do, and your thoughts towards climate and the future?
Like I said, we understand the importance of the evolving energy sector. We want to be at the forefront to be that safe and reliable workforce. But at the same time, we want to enhance the current technologies that we already have. We understand that carbon needs to be addressed, and we feel that we can address the impact of carbon while maintaining some of the fossil fuel industries that we have. I know our brothers and sisters to the north in Canada have just implemented a carbon capture system, and I feel that we can learn a lot from what they did and scale back that and gain a lot of efficiencies going forward.
Chris Anderson, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Rick, thank you, sir. Take care.
You as well. You know, and look, at the end of it, as I said, you know, we can have the policy discussions back and forth, which is the best, you know, energy sector, which is the best idea, which is the best platform. At the end of it, for me, it's about getting those workers trained, making sure those are quality jobs, family sustaining jobs, that, well, when we replace older ones, people can make a living at. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Tim Griffin's going to be here to share some thoughts on an apprenticeship program, how we move forward, how do we get those workers trained. Quick break, right back with Tim. You know, we hear an awful lot, especially around Earth Day, about what the new energy economy is going to look like. You know, which technology is going to win the grand battle and move us into the future? Is it going to be solar or wind? Is it going to be geothermal or nuclear? Where do we end up? Is frack gas, is that the future of our energy cycle? The reality is it, to me, it almost doesn't matter which one we choose. It just matters that we use good quality workers, people who are highly skilled, well-trained, and, well, know their job and do it well. That's really one of the key components in moving forward, because I think everybody's concerned about climate change. And the question is, where will our elected leaders move us forward? And here to share some thoughts on, you know, how we get to that place forward, I've asked Tim Griffin to come talk with us. Tim is the training director with IBEW Local 229 in York, Pennsylvania. Tim, thanks for taking time for us.
Sure. Thanks for having me on.
So, you know, I see this, and we hear the debates going on all over the place. And, you know, is it going to be one technology or is it going to be the other? But one of the things I don't think we hear enough of is who's actually going to do that work, and how do we get those people the skills that they're going to need to be able to do that work?
That's the beauty of the IBEW and the NECA partnership they've coordinated through the Electrical Training Alliance, is that we have the flexibility, we have the resources, we have the manpower to meet those needs. As you indicated, we really don't know which direction it's going to go. So our responsibility is to prepare for all of it. So we train our workers on wind, solar, energy storage, microgrids, all those things we have to be prepared for. And the technology is always changing. So it's a big responsibility to keep all of our workers up to date on those needs.
Yeah, one of the things that, you know, I've talked about numerous times is your union, the IBEW, has a fantastic, you know, solar training center out in California where that's their focus. That's the next generation in California, and it isn't, you know, one of the things that I find most interesting is your union does in different areas what is advantageous in those areas. So you're training local workers to do the local work based on, you know, geographics.
Sure. As you indicated, out in Los Angeles, they have a beautiful facility. It's a net zero building that actually generates as much or more energy as they use. And in addition to just being able to install solar panels and wind turbines, it's important that all these systems are getting smarter and they're interconnected. And everything from the HVAC to the security systems, and everything's integrated, lighting controls, they're all tied into a network. So the electricians are really involved in every single aspect of the new type of building construction that's happening. And across the country, certain programs, I think it was Chicago, I can't remember, Chicago, I know Nebraska had one, but they actually built a whole silo to simulate a wind turbine where they can climb inside and have all the safety mechanisms and things necessary to train apprentices safely. So we do have that flexibility where in York, Pennsylvania, there's not a real big wind market yet. So we haven't done a lot of wind training, but we do have solar. We have just installed a tracker on our building that's going to cover the energy uses of the training center. So we are training everybody on the technologies needed in our areas.
No, and that's really important thing. As you pointed out, in different areas you're going to have different things, but it's the training part of it that's most interesting to me because as you're going through talking about what the new energy looks like today. I'm thinking about electricians that were trained when I was younger, going through high school, and basically it was just tying a couple wires together and a nut on top, and you're done. You're almost talking to do what you do today. You almost need to be an electrical engineer to figure some of this stuff out.
That's true. Our training program is credited towards electrical engineering degrees, and most of our courses carry over into those programs. And a lot of the systems that our people are using are all still rooted in the electrical theory that's hasn't changed since Tesla. So electricity still operates the same. It's just how we get it to those components, and now components are talking to each other more. So to be able to do these jobs, you still need to have that rooted foundation in how electricity works, the importance of grounding, electrical code, all those types of things are still necessary as the scaffolding, the foundation that all these new systems are built upon.
Right. The reason I bring this up is, because, as we move towards, one type of energy or another, there are going to be things that are basically universal truths that we're going to have the basis for. But as I keep looking at, where we're heading, it comes back down to that training and who is going to do it. Because I think a lot of people, Tim, think that, we're going to flip a switch. It's going to be just, we're going to snap our fingers and we're going to move from, the dirty, ugly stuff to this wonderful, clean, new environment. And it's going to be, the transition is going to be just overnight. And we're not going to displace a bunch of people on one end and have to retrain a bunch of people and have that frictional time in between that's going to be really chaotic and painful for a lot of folks. And I think, having what you guys do is so important in, helping that transition.
Yeah, I agree. As we indicated, with the ability to be flexible with what's being trained in different areas based on the local market needs, as the different technologies roll out in different parts of the country, we're able to tap into that knowledge base of other cities that might have already started and implemented more widespread. For example, if wind starts becoming big in South Central Pennsylvania, there's a huge knowledge base of training directors across the country that we can reach out to and tap into and say, how are you doing the training? What are the new technologies you're seeing? So having that flexibility and having that rolling implementation across the country is really a big advantage for the IBEW and the NECA team.
So let me ask you this, because, I have a lot of people going, well, how do we get to this next place? And I'm going, become IBEW members, take the apprenticeship programs. Because one of the things that I do on our radio program is I talk about how wonderful the union apprenticeship programs are. The fact that you can get a job, you can get into these programs, you can get paid while you learn, and at the end of it, you end up with a portable skill that, well, you got paid to learn doing. I think that's an incredible model that we don't hear anywhere else, and I don't think we hear enough about.
I agree 100%. A lot of times, if you look at job postings, they might say you need a bachelor's degree and 3 to 5 years experience or something. They want the credential and the experience. Well, with apprenticeship, you get the credential and the experience while you're going through the program. So when you complete, you already have the credential and that 3 to 5 years experience that you need to really be successful in a career. And you can't get that outside of apprenticeship.
I looked at, Jay Inslee, the governor of Washington, has his, green kind of New Deal idea, how we move away from, old fuels to new fuels. And one of the things that he put right at the center of it was the fact that, workers have to be at the front of any change that happens. that we train the next generation of workers, and we don't saddle them with a lifetime of debt. And we help the folks who are going to be affected by this negatively, help them transition and so that they don't lose. I look at, your programs and I go, this is part of that way forward, regardless of which side of the issue you're on. This is part of the way forward.
Sure. And with the IBEW, our position is that no matter where you are in your career, we can bring you on board and upskill you and give you the training you need to advance. So if you are a dislocated worker in the electrical industry or something, you can contact the local IBEW. They'll measure what skills you have and what skills you need to move forward and be successful if you're switching industries or markets or things like that. We really have an open door policy that we want anybody in the electrical industry to come in and we'll help them advance.
No, it's an amazing thing, and I hope people will check out the work that you guys do. Not just in New York, Pennsylvania, which I understand has probably one of the better training facilities in the country, and I love the work that you do and the things that you do for working people across the Commonwealth and across the country as well, Tim.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate the time. Keep up the great work. Thanks so much.
All right, thanks for having me on.
Tim Griffith, he is the training director there for IBEW Local 229. I'd love to hear your thoughts. At the end of this, as I said, when you look at Inslee's plan, when you look at a lot of these transition plans, how do we make sure that at the very front of it are the working people who are going to be affected by it? I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back. So the American Society of Civil Engineers has given our energy infrastructure a D+, which isn't bad considering most of our infrastructure is somewhere worse than that. The question is, how do we make sure that we upgrade that? How do we make sure that we move forward? One of the things that I've often said is one of the things that made this country great is we always fought for the new technology. We always invested up to what was possible. Sadly, the last 20, 30 years, we really have not done that, and we've lived off the investment of past generations. So this Earth Day week, one of the things I wanted to talk about is, how do we upgrade that? How do we move forward? How do we deal with the climate issue? And along the way, make sure that, the workers who are affected by it, they're the ones who benefit. That's why I've asked Vinny Albanese to come talk with us. Vinny is the Director of Policy and Public Affairs with the New York State Laborers Organizing and PAC funds. Vinny, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, happy to do it, Rick.
So, this Earth Day week, one of those moments where we talk about the climate, we talk about moving forward, renewable energy, all of the green technologies, all of those things that I think a lot of us want to move towards, but want to make sure that working people don't end up left in the lurch. I'm curious what LIUNA's position is on where we move, how fast we move, the kind of things that you guys are working towards.
Sure. So, this is a complicated issue. It's complicated for a variety of reasons, and mainly because when we talk about making this transition, often it's called the just transition. I think often we find that the workers that are impacted, I don't think there's an adequate or an honest conversation necessarily happening about how large and significant that displacement of those workers is. And I think as you transition away from certain fossil fuels into, some renewable energy infrastructure, I think there's a couple questions that need to be answered. Number one, how do you deal with that worker displacement, which is pretty significant and in many places in the country and even in New York can be pretty damaging. And then I think also you have to answer the question about what are realistic goals that we can meet that still supply the energy that we need, and where are the variety of different sources that are going to be used to create that energy mix. So I think those are really the two questions that need to be answered.
Right. And I know you guys in New York, and I know your union, LIUNA, is, got a wind program that, moving towards moving to some wind energy, and also training those workers to be able to build that wind infrastructure. Because ultimately, as we've been talking about today, I'm in favor of moving to a cleaner economy. I'm in favor of doing some new technologies. But at the end of it, As you've pointed out, the people who are going to be affected negatively, we've got to make sure that they're taken care of. But also the jobs that are created out of this have got to be good quality, family sustaining kind of jobs.
So the first is, we at LIUNA and in New York State, recently, if you saw in the budget, there were changes to what's called the Article 10 process, which is how you get energy projects site in the state of New York. And there was a backlog of 60, 70 some odd renewable projects that were essentially just not moving forward because the way that the law was structured, particularly when it pertains to renewables, was pretty antiquated. And the governor rightfully proposed some really significant changes, and both the Senate and the Assembly passed many of those changes to modify the Article 10 process so a lot of those projects could actually move forward. One of the problems we've had in making this transition and moving away from certain natural gas projects and then trying to work on the renewables is many of the renewables were not starting, right? Or some of them were not even becoming economically viable because of the antiquated laws. So that was a big, significant step forward.
Right.
And we were one of the only unions really in the state that were actively pushing for those changes. So we worked with a lot of other coalition members, but really happy that those changes happened to move those projects forward. So that's one piece, right? We want to work on these projects. But the second piece, like I alluded to, is that these projects, I'm going to use some numbers here, Rick. They're not necessarily adequate or accurate numbers, but let's say you're going to build a natural gas pipeline that's going to serve a power plant that's going to generate, let's say, 300 megawatts of electricity. That pipeline, I'm just going to use some numbers, might take 200 laborers, engineers, teamsters, et cetera, working on that pipeline for, let's say, 2 years. Now, let's say you're going to build a 300 megawatt wind farm. That may only take 50 laborers and engineers and other trades, maybe 6 months to build, right? So there's significant net job losses that happen as we make this transition. And our position has been that, number one, there still is a role for natural gas to play, right? We believe that we are not ready to fully move away.
Right.
But then the other part of it that we've really been pushing is that all along the supply chain of those jobs, so that goes from everything from the manufacturing of, let's say, the wind turbines and the solar panels, some of the prefabrication work that's done, some of the prep work that needs to be done and planning work, site work, all that type of stuff. Then the actual construction of, let's say, the wind farm. And then following that, even things like the maintenance of the wind farm. And those wouldn't all be jobs necessarily for laborers, but all of those jobs, if they were good middle-class union jobs, would at least mitigate some of the damage done by the net job losses in general, right? So that's been our general position on those two things.
Which is why, when we were during the presidential primary here, one of the plans that I liked was from Governor Jay Inslee, who was talking about how to transition to a greener economy, how to mitigate some of the damage that we're doing. But for his plan was workers were right at the front of it, and that we were going to have a way forward to make sure that anyone negatively impacted would be taken care of, and that we were going to do the training, and these were going to be good family sustaining union jobs with living wages and health care and retirement security, all the things that your members enjoy. And I've been saying this is a great idea because, well, we're going to take the kind of things that your members are used to and expand that to the greater working class, which I think is a win-win for everybody. We get cleaner energy, we get a better economy, we get a fairer economy, and we leave something better for our kids. I don't see a downside to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. And I think the one thing that we really ask, when we're having this conversation with electeds or candidates, or even civil servants that work in this space, is that when they're discussing these plans, that the worker is at the front of those discussions and those plans.
Right.
And that it's not something to be figured out later after the fact, but something that quite the opposite needs to be figured out in advance, so that as we make this transition, number one, it's an easier transition to make. But number two, I mean, you're really talking about a radical shift in the way our economy functions. And in order to preserve those jobs that we've come to rely on, particularly in the trades, you need to do this with the worker in mind at the front of it. And
Right.
there are very simple things. I mean, I'll give you one for instance. If you take NYSERDA grant and you take some NYSERDA money to build your wind farm, that subjects you to prevailing wages during the construction of that wind farm. But maybe we need to think a little bit more outside the box. That let's say we say, okay, once you take that NYSERDA money, now you are subject to prevailing wages along the supply chain, or post construction to the people that are actually going to work there, even if it's only 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 people that are going to work at that wind farm or solar farm, doing maintenance work, doing landscaping, doing cleaning, that we ensure that all along the life of the project, that we are, we are finding avenues that, again, support good middle-class union jobs.
Yeah.
So
No,
just
I'm right there
things
with you.
like that.
No, instead of setting up a system where maybe the people who built this made family sustaining wages, and the people who are going to come in and operate it down the road are working for poverty wages, maybe we think about everybody in the whole chain. I think that's a great idea, and something, again, that has to be illuminated to our policymakers. It's something that has to be at the forefront and something we fight for. And the reason I think today is so important is, we hear a lot from the environmental community about, we need, to pass this on to our children. We need for them to breathe clean air and drink clean water. And I go, I'm 100% there, but we also need to make sure that they expect and demand to make good wages so that they themselves can support themselves and their families.
Absolutely, Rick. I couldn't agree with you more there.
So what do you say, Vinny, to the environmental group who says, look, you're part of the problem. You're part of the old economy. You're an entrenched interest. All you want to do is, just status quo. How do you reach out to those folks and make them realize that labor is not the enemy in this battle, that you're actually an ally?
So, I mean, a couple of things, like I mentioned earlier, our advocacy for the changes to the Article 10 to the siting process for these renewables. We spend significant resources, staff time, lobbying efforts to actually advocate to get those changes done, which will benefit, a growing or hopefully growing renewable industry, right? So we are doing advocacy work that in a lot of times, even some of those environmental groups are not necessarily doing and putting on the line and spending political capital to actually ensure that those projects move forward. So that's one thing. We are definitely actively working to move those projects forward. The second thing I would say, and it's something that I think is very, very dismissive. Sometimes maybe we'll be at a hearing and we'll be advocating for, let's say, a natural gas pipeline. And someone will get up and they'll say, well, all you care about as an entrenched interest, like you said, all you care about is these jobs, right? These temporary jobs. And the way I would respond to that is, in the life of a construction worker, every job you have is temporary. And it's when you're in a union, it's those temporary jobs that are strung together that actually make your career. And if you're going to argue against us advocating for one project over another on the basis of it only being a temporary job, I would say that all the renewable projects that we are advocating for, and that some in the environmental community might be advocating for, those are also temporary jobs, right? So that, I would say, is probably the most frustrating thing that we deal with in any of our energy advocacy, is getting people to understand that the life of a construction worker is a series of temporary jobs strung together. And we have to constantly be out there fighting for more of those job opportunities.
No, you're right. I'm right there with you. I mean, if this is what you're doing, you want to advocate for those jobs. It may not be that you wanted that project to happen or not. It's happening, and those should be union jobs. And this is one of those moments where, and this is what I explained to some of my green friends, that labor is not the enemy here, which is why I think you need to have that blue-green alliance. The enemy here is a political system that's not leading us in the direction that we need to go. And what ends up happening is a dysfunctional political system is filtering down to a division between working people and environmentalists, and it doesn't have to be that way.
Absolutely, Rick. And that's a really good point when you talk about the political system. Often what's happened, I mean, we've seen this a lot, particularly, let's say an example might be in affordable housing, right? And you look, let's say in New York City, and you'll have, affordable housing advocates, which we desperately need more affordable housing. They will say, we can't build these projects with union wages because we are in a crisis and we need to get these jobs done, and we need to do this as quickly as possible, and we can't waste resources on that, right? And our argument there is that all you're doing is actually perpetuating the need for more, let's say, affordable housing by paying people poverty wages.
Right.
But we hear that same political argument made in the green space, right? We can't, for instance, you look at, we don't do too much of it, but rooftop solar. Rooftop solar is one of the most dangerous, if you look at some of the things that happen in rooftop solar, one of the most dangerous industries, growing industries in the country right now. You have a largely exploited workforce doing this for often poverty wages, no benefits. And it's all done often in the name of, when there's an exemption, let's say, we can't apply prevailing wages or we can't apply certain protections to workers doing, let's say, rooftop solar. Well, that's all done in the name of we need to get as much rooftop solar done as quickly as possible, right? Because we are in a crisis. And again, so to your point about the political system, we often hear that argument, and you can apply that argument to anything. But at the end of the day, the worker's the one that gets the short end of the stick when we buy into that political argument.
No, I'm right
so
there.
We just don't.
No, right there with you. And look, the argument I always make is you want the best quality employee, the best trained, the best skilled, because you can look at projects all across the country where union labor has been used. They usually come in on time, under budget, and safe. So it's one of those pay me now or pay me later kind of scenarios, which is usually how I answer those arguments. Oh, we need as many people as cheaply as possible. I go, well, minimum wage, minimum effort kind of mentality. So last question I've got for you, because we have all of this idea that we're going to transition to this new utopian economy. It's all going to be great, and there's going to be no bumps along the road. I keep coming back to who's actually going to build it. As I've been talking about today, union apprenticeship programs are on the forefront of doing that stuff. And you guys have a fantastic apprenticeship program as well. Can you tell me a little bit about what you guys do?
Yeah. So, one of the things in making this transition is a lot of the skills that our members are already trained in. Let's say something like rigging or trenching. These are all applicable skills. Let's say when you're talking about wind farm construction, concrete work, site work preparation. We already have many of the skills that are applicable to just move over, right? And then what we've actually been doing in conjunction with our international training is helping our local affiliates to integrate programs. Some of them are done online. We can get national kind of accreditations and certifications in wind, solar, hydro, geothermal, all those type of things. So finding those courses, getting them in the hands of training directors, that's one thing. And the other thing is actually registering a curriculum, whether it be through the DOL in the state or, even in other states that they're doing this, where the curriculum actually represents the needs of the clean energy developers, right? So when we are in conversation with many of these developers and we're entering into, let's say, a MOU or some sort of agreement, one of the questions we're constantly asking is what are skills that our workers need to be trained in that are going to make these projects, again, like you said, come in on time, under budget, all those things, and be the safest as they possibly can be. So we're constantly kind of reevaluating what those training programs are and little by little integrating them into our apprenticeship programs, and not just our apprenticeship programs, but also making sure journey workers are trained in those skills as well.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. I mean, the continuing education you guys do, and all of the building trades unions do through their programs, incredible, and things that need to most certainly, especially at this time, be taken into consideration. Vinny, I appreciate the time and the thoughts. Keep up the great work you guys are doing there, and I hope you'll come back and talk with us again.
Thanks so much, Rick.
Good stuff. Vinny Albanese. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Share your tales. Are there moments where labor and green, where the blue and the green come together? Are there moments where that works? Are you a part of it? Love to hear it. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. I want to thank Chris Anderson, Tim Griffin, and Vinny Albanese for their time and their thoughts today. I mean, this is one of those moments where, as I said from the beginning, we need to make sure that we bridge those divides that we've been told are insurmountable, that we're never going to get beyond the blue-green divide, that we're always going to be pitted against one another. I think there's an opportunity to go forward as long as we're willing to acknowledge that the other side is important too, and not allow the moneyed interest to pit us against each other, and to really think about what kind of a future do we want? Which is, like I said, I like Governor Inslee's plan of putting workers at the front of this, and should be at the front of the planning. The people closest to the problem, the people closest to the ground, I think are the folks that you really need to have in place right from the start. So I want to thank those guys for sharing some thoughts and giving me giving all of us some ideas on where we go. But again, when I look at the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, and I think about, next year, 51, do we want to look back and say we didn't get anything accomplished? Again, this is why politics matters. This 2020 election matters. The person that you put into the House of Representatives, into the Senate, into the White House, into state houses and state senates and governor's mansions across the country, it matters. And the more you see the moneyed interest lining up behind any candidate, the more you should be, thinking twice about them. And this is one of those times where it's us. We're the ones who are the deciders. We're the people who are, I would argue, causing this great divide. I would love to hear your thoughts on it. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Also, coming up on April 28th, Workers' Memorial Day. I want everyone to remember on that day the workers who have sacrificed, who have gone to work looking to support their families and have lost their lives in the process of that. And to commit to the idea that we need to commit to safer workplaces. In this moment of pandemic, in this moment of coronavirus and essential workers, right now, more than ever, we need to think about those folks, commit to ensure their safety, and, to hold those accountable who put them into harm's way. I still love the Mother Jones frame of mourn the dead, but fight like hell for the living. We must do that. We mourn the people who have lost their lives because of this horrible pandemic. But we fight like hell for the people who are still with us and we've put into harm's way. The reality is, and I've been saying this since the beginning, every worker should have a voice. Every worker should be listened to, and we need to hold employers accountable. If you're in an unsafe workplace, you need to have the ability to speak up. You've got one life. That's it. There's no do-overs. There's no, don't want to rock the boat. Because here's the thing. Once you get thrown out of the boat, with this, there's no getting back. So this Workers' Memorial Day, April 28th, I hope people will take a moment, reflect on the people that they've known over the years. And I have known several people who have lost their lives on the job. And every Workers' Memorial Day, I remember them. I remember what took their lives. And I remember, why we fight, why we commit to ensure that we have safe workplaces. And we're seeing every day right now what's going on with this pandemic. And we're seeing slowly, and in my estimation, way too slowly, employers moving towards maybe doing things. Which is why I think you need to see much more worker action, much more media attention to it, and also laws that are going to protect them. What's become painfully apparent is in pandemic situations where workers can be exposed to illness on the job, they're woefully unprotected. And one of the things that I would like to see is a change to our workers' compensation laws, to where if you get sick on the job, if we're really, truly essential workers, if we're critical to the infrastructure and the well-being of the country, we should be paid as such. We should be compensated well. We should have good health care benefits for when we get sick that we get taken care of. And we should have a voice in that place where we risk our lives. And not just during times of pandemic, but every day. This is one of the things that I've talked about over the years, and I've been doing this a long time. I've never known a day without my ability to speak up. I want that for every worker. I want that for every worker every day, not just in moments of pandemic. So on April 28th, I hope you'll remember all those who have lost their lives on the job and mourn their death, but also commit to, well, fighting like hell for the rest of us. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next week.